Music for All is proud to sponsor Bandstand. At Music for All, we're about providing positively life-changing experiences. Join us with your marching band at Bands of America or with your concert ensemble at the Music for All National Festival. Students can audition for our honor ensembles or attend camp at the Music for All Summer Symposium, featuring the Sweetwater Director Academy, an amazing week of professional development for directors led by Dr. Nola Jones. Learn more at musicforall.org.
Romeo Music is the leader in audio, video, music, and lighting technology for educators. With a combined nearly 200 years of experience, Romeo Music's subject matter experts understand the struggles that face teachers in today's music classrooms. With a laser focus on educational technology, Romeo Music provides a turnkey solution, everything from audio cables to on-site training. To learn more, visit www.romeomusic.net.
Hello, and welcome to Bandstand, the official podcast of the Tennessee Bandmasters Association. I'm your host, David Adelit, and I hope you'll join us on a journey through the past, present, and future of bands in Tennessee. We'll delve into the rich history of Tennessee bands, uncovering the hidden gems and legendary figures who shaped the state's band landscape. We'll survey the present, where you'll meet the movers and shakers of today, gaining insights from their expertise and experiences. And we'll gaze towards the future, exploring the exciting possibilities that await Tennessee's school bands. Okay, everybody, I'm excited about this one. We're here with Lafe Cook, who is let's just be honest, the preeminent school band director in Tennessee, and has been for a long time, and is also my good friend. So, Lafe, welcome to Bandstand.
Thanks, David. And that's just silly talk, but I appreciate the compliment. The friendship part is real. The preeminent part is silly talk.
Well, I think it's true, and you're just being nice. All right, so, Lafe, let's hear your story.
Okay. So my background with family is all the National Park Service. So I got to live some amazing places growing up as my dad, who is named John E. Cook, who is sort of a legend in the National Park Service now, was going through his career. And so my sister, who's older than me, 7 years older than me, she really got to live in the parks when he was like boots on the ground ranger work in Yellowstone and other places. As I was growing up, he was more in administration. And so we lived in San Francisco and Washington, D.C. and a bunch of cool places. And then my dad had an amazing job where when Jimmy Carter signed the Alaska Lands Act, and that turned all of that, what was basically the Wild West in Alaska, like the land was basically owned by nobody and you could take your rifle off the mantle and shoot bears and moose or whatever. Jimmy Carter created all that, turned all that into federal land. And my dad was the first regional director of every national park in Alaska. And if this goes long, tell me. I'll go.
No, keep going.
Okay. So I remember when he got the job, we were living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which I loved Santa Fe. And so we moved to Alaska. And that summer, before he officially started his job in the office in Anchorage, he wanted to visit every national park in Alaska, and I got to go with him. So,
how many are there?
A lot.
Also, I'm sure that those folks in Alaska were really excited about Jimmy Carter's action.
Oh, okay, David, this is going to end up a podcast about the Park Service. In my dad's home office is a cutout of a piece of glass from our living room window that has a bullet hole in it. The entire first 6 months of his job, an Alaska State Trooper car lived in front of our house. This is true. But that summer, back to the first summer, I got to go with him and visit every national park in Alaska. We flew in a plane that would land on water, a runway, or tundra. It was like this crazy device. He had an amazing career there during the Carter administration, which was a one and done, as you remember. And then the Reagan administration was like, hey, John Cook, we really think that maybe we want to drill for oil in national parks. That seems like a thing that would be good for our country. And my dad was like, well, that's not really the mission of the National Park Service. And so the Reagan admission said, well, all respect, sure, you're fired. But they don't really fire you in this world. They just move you around. And so my dad was moved to be the superintendent of the Great Smoky Mountains in Gatlinburg. And so that's how I ended up in Tennessee. And it's so funny. I fought you've heard I won't tell that story, but you've heard the story of me running away. I ran away when they were loading the moving van in Alaska. I ran away and ran away for quite some time. Eventually.
What's 17 minutes? How long was it?
Oh no.
Wait, no, you were in high school, right?
I was a freshman in high school, and I stayed run away for a month.
No way.
This is true. My parents actually signed over.
I didn't know it was that long. I knew it was a pretty good while. I knew it was more than 17 minutes. I didn't realize it was a month.
It was a month. My parents signed over guardianship to their best friends and moved without me. This is true. I remember walking. I was mostly Dungeons and Dragons friends with all these college age kids. So I would go and sleep on their dorm room floors while they were in class, and then we would play Dungeons and Dragons till the wee hours of the morning. And then I would wander around downtown Anchorage. I remember, and there was a point where I want to go home now. I didn't know really how to do it. And I was walking down the street in Anchorage, and I saw this guy across the street in a tweed jacket with elbow pads, the things, corduroy. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and then he reached in his pocket and pulled out a stack of papers and started unfolding them because he had me pegged. He was looking for the picture. So I just walked across the street to him and basically held out my hands for the cuffs.
It's over.
So I rode with a sky marshal. I sat in the front. So I had lived a lot of places. None of them were the South. So when I was busted, I had to ride with a sky marshal on an airplane from Anchorage, Alaska to McGee-Tyson Airport in Knoxville, Tennessee. And this was June.
That's a long flight.
Yeah. Front seat.
What is that?
Front seat.
How long was that?
A long time. There were flight changes. I'm sure. I don't really remember this. What I do remember, having never lived in the South, was when the plane door opened in McGee-Tyson, Knoxville, the humidity went and I remember that like it was yesterday. I ended up loving Gatlinburg. Loved my 1 year in high school in Gatlinburg. I had Ken Jarnigan was my band director, and he was not there for very long. Lord, this is all one long story. So I had been an all-state clarinetist, first chair all-state clarinet in the Alaska All-State Band. We had played Tulsa, which is a dated, horrible piece of music, but and I had played the clarinet solo. And then I ran away, moved to Tennessee. And Ken Jarnigan had propped the Gatlinburg Pittman High School Band up on sticks and duct tape so that they could go to festival in grade 3, praying for a 2, and he said, I'm going to hear you play your instrument. We've got festival in 2 weeks. I'm going to hear you play your instrument after festival. So I sat in the back of the Gatlinburg Pittman band room, an all-state clarinet player for 2 weeks, while Jarnigan worked on, I have it. It's a
Rhythm of the Winds.
No, the Swearingen. Close. Anyway. By the time those 2 weeks were over, I was like, I think I can play the trombone part on the trombone if you want me to. And so after they went to festival and got their split 2, he said, okay, let's hear you play. So I played the solo from Tulsa, and he just put his head in his hands.
I wish this was a video podcast now. It might be.
So
wait, hang on. Let's back up to this one thing. So I just want to hear about the Dungeons and Dragons part. And I also want to know, we all know the iconic Lafe Cook look. It's Kennedy-esque. What was the look when you were playing Dungeons and Dragons as a sophomore in Anchorage, Alaska?
Now, The only reason you can possibly be asking this is I've already told you this part of.
No, I actually don't know this.
Oh.
I actually don't know this.
So I had it was straight up out of Stranger Things, like 100%, like a scene from Stranger Things. I remember I had this army jacket of my uncle's that had the Screaming Eagle, 101st Airborne on the shoulder, and I never took it off. I never took it off. My hair was long. I was somehow a decent band student, but I was not a very good academic student. But you also know me well enough to know exactly where. My dad has been an amazing influence on my life. He spent most of his career wearing a Park Service uniform. My dad's a very buttoned-up human and has his act together, but my Kennedy-esque, to use your words, that all came from Jay Julian, and you know that. So I'm at Gatlinburg-Pittman High School, and Ken Jarnigan is my band director, and Dr. Julian is starting the very first Smoky Mountain Music Festival. And he's trying to figure out if it's going to be viable. And so he's doing it on the cheap. So he goes to the local band director, my band director, Ken Jarnigan, and says, "Do you have any high school kids who will work for pennies?"
And there's the voice.
Socks and t-shirts.
You just modulate it into that. No problem at all.
It happens. And so I worked for the very first Smoky Mountain Music Festival, the spring, even before high school was out. I was doing the weekends, the spring of my senior year. I had planned to go into pre-law at several places. I think I had chosen this Poochty private school called Hampton Sydney was where I wanted to go to school and do pre-law. And I'm working those weekends in the late spring for Smoky Mountain. And I'm meeting Harry Bijan as an 18-year-old. And I'm meeting Ken Bloomquist. And Fred Fennell was there one weekend. And so I'm meeting all these people. And I love band and love playing my instrument. And so Dr. Julian sort of very casually offered me a scholarship in an incredibly unofficial way. And I was very enamored by those people and the fact that they were from all over the country and knew each other and were close friends. And there was this weird camaraderie and legacy about their careers and their students. And so I was like, screw this pre-law thing. Let's do some band.
And, and this is jumping ahead probably, but you and I have talked about this when we did our presentation at TMEA 10 years ago, that we both purport that band directors should take their job as seriously as a doctor or a lawyer or airline pilot or whatever. Like, that's the key, is to be really good, is to take your job as seriously as you would if you were in a courtroom, like Kenneth Bloomquist and those gentlemen that you mentioned did for their entire careers.
Dr. Julian used to say, "I could have been a lawyer. I could have been a senator. I wanted to be a band director." And so you're very correct. I learned that from him and others, Rick Murphy, people. There's lots of people that I learned this from later. But watching Dr. Julian treat band directing like it was as important as being the governor of our state or a senator was very impactful to me, for sure.
I had a similar experience with Mr. Smith at MTSU, Joseph T. Smith, who died about 10 years ago. It's the 10-year anniversary of his death was, I think, a couple of weeks ago. Same kind of thing. I learned as much from working wind band conference as a college kid or working band camps for him in the summer as I did from any class at that university. How to operate on as high a possible level of organization as possible all the time. And even still, when I was teaching, making out a schedule and double, triple, quadruple checking it, I could feel Mr. Smith's presence, and Miss Mitchell was the assistant. Linda Mitchell was the assistant band director. I could feel that influence up until last year when I was still teaching. Just the sense of expectation for how to run an event, how to think through everything, how to provide clarity through order.
For sure. My experience, and working Smoky Mountain. So I worked that spring of my senior in high school, and then I kept doing it all through college. So I actually got to know Joe Smith because he would come judge for Dr. Julian,
Right.
which was so cool. And it's neat. Our state has had and has maybe more than our share of those people. Dr. Julian looms large in this world for sure. Joe T.
Yes.
Smith, also Sid McKay in West Tennessee in his years at the University of Memphis. But one of the coolest things is these people exist in every state, and it's one of the neat connectivity moments that those of us who had those iconic mentors, whether you grew up in Illinois or Indiana or California or Virginia or Tennessee, South Carolina, you can go right down the list of the places where these folks existed. And I worried for a while that those people didn't exist anymore in the higher ed world. And I think I am wrong. And I think there's more of them now maybe than there were 10 years ago, which is exciting for people who are going into music ed,
Okay, so you're at UT and you become drum major at UT.
That's a story.
Go ahead.
I was the assistant drum major at UT, and my good friend John Martin, who's currently the director of bands at Grand Valley State, was the drum major. And I won't go into great detail on this story, but things did not work out for John for a moment in time, and I got promoted on the Saturday morning of a home football game. So suddenly I'm drum major. No rehearsal. I was actually appointed drum major after the morning rehearsal was over. So I have to do a D1 Power 5 conference marching band pregame and halftime. No practice.
This is Leonard Bernstein-esque at Boston.
So this is where
when Bruno Walter got ill. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. People talk about, there's so many people, and you're so much better at knowing the names, but there's all these people who talk about visualization, and that's like their whole way they function in high pressure situations. And so I had to, and so I ran to the band room. They said, go to the band room, and they hooked up the 8mm tape. That's how old I am. And I sat in the UT band office and watched 8mm tape of pregame, UT pregame, opening the tee, all the things. Hadn't done it. And I just watched it and tried to visualize where I went and where I stopped. And it was horrible. I mean, I did okay. I didn't mess anything up. The team didn't run over me or anything. But it was a miserable year. I'd never expected to do it. I'd never prepared to do it in any way, mentally or literally. And at the end of that year, I changed my major to business. And so I didn't quit band. I changed my major, but I was like, I'm done with this. I stayed in band, I had a scholarship. Dr. June let me keep my scholarship. And so, anyway, time passed. I ended up being drum major again, and that year was much more pleasurable.
Well, I'm not going to ask you to tell the drum major uniform story, but that is my favorite story, though. And the part that's my favorite is the policeman, right? That said, I was in band at UT. I know what Dr. Julian's like, or whatever, and completely helped you cover up your crime.
It wasn't a crime. It was a matter of necessity. And so now I have to tell it, right? Like, it's going to be confusing. I was drum major. This was the year I was actually prepared to be drum major, not the first time around. And we had a morning practice. The practice was over, and I realized I had left Saturday morning practice, game day practice, and I realized I had left my one-of-a-kind UT drum major uniform at the cleaners. I'd forgotten to pick it up at the cleaners. So I hightail it to the cleaners. The cleaners I used was on what's called the Strip in Knoxville, Cumberland Avenue, where all the college bars are and everyone pre-games. And there was already a huge crowd. I think we were playing Auburn. It was a 3:00 kickoff. And I don't know why I went there. I knew the cleaners would be closed, and they were closed. So I went to the front door and rattled the doorknob and It was locked, shockingly. So I went to the back door, rattled the doorknob, also locked. So I'm freaking out. Like, I'm on scholarship. I'd already had this awful year as drum major. Dr. Julian is the most intense human being on the planet. So I'm like, I don't know what to do. I look down and there's a loose brick on the sidewalk.
But wait. Kickoff's at 3, but that's not when your job started.
No, I had to be at the Hyatt Pet Band. I had to be on a bus for the Hyatt Pet Band. Yes, that's true. That's true. Wow, good memory. So the loose brick, everyone can see this coming. I pick up the brick, and in my desperation, I throw it through the pane glass part of the door, front door. And an alarm goes off, and a crowd gathers. And so I'm like, I'm done. I forget it. I'm out. I just sat down on the curb and began to weep. I didn't even go trying to open. I was just, I'm done. So Cumberland Avenue is right on the edge of the strip, of campus. And so pretty much simultaneously, based on the alarm, a UT cop arrives and a Knoxville cop arrives about the same time. And the crowd gets bigger. And everyone's pointing, that kid did it. So they walk over like, what in the world are you doing? And I'm like, I'm a drum major UT man in my uniform. And I'm trying to explain what's happening. The two cops look at each other.
Wait, did the glass just shatter? It was one of those big glass window fronts, right?
Not the front.
Did the whole thing?
No, it was a glass on the door. It was a smaller window pane just on the door.
Okay.
And so the two police officers look at each other. And they walk away and talk briefly. And then one goes over to the glass I'd broken and reaches through the broken glass and opens the door using his hand from the inside. And the other cop goes across the street into the Walgreens. and the crowd gets bigger. And so about simultaneously, the police officer who'd gone into the Walgreens comes out holding cardboard boxes and a roll of tape. The other cop comes out of the cleaners, holds up my uniform to the crowd. The crowd cheers. All UT fans. He hands me my uniform, and the other cop begins to tape up the window. But before that, they looked at me and said, hey, we both played trombone in the UT band. You better haul butt, boy, because we know Dr. Julian. And so I never heard. Now, I did use a new cleaners from then on and never heard another thing about it. Not one thing. No one asked me to pay for the window. Nothing. Those cops just dealt with it.
Do you know them? They got to be on your Christmas card list, man.
I tried to find that. KPD, what are you gonna do? But I tried to find that. We had the UT cop who was always traveling with the band was named Officer Friels, and all my years at UT, he was the guy. And I said, Officer Friels, you got to find out who this cop was. And he said he won't. He said, I have tried, and this kid is whoever this cop was has clammed up. Does not want to be associated with Dr. Julian being mad at him or whatever. So they could not figure out who it was.
Oh, this is such a great story. I'm sorry, I need a minute. I didn't know about the crowd cheering part.
That's the best.
That's
part.
new.
So I mentioned Sid McKay, who was one of.
If this has happened now, though, you'd be on every Instagram reel.
Oh, yeah.
Because all the crowd would have had their phones out, and
we were talking about those sort of iconic figures across at least our state in Tennessee, and Sid McKay is one of those historic people in West Tennessee. We played in the University of Memphis one year at UT. I knew that Sid McKay and Dr. Julian were big buddies from way back. I had seen them basically hugging before the game. And then we did pregame. I was drum major. And we had opened the tee. The team had run through, and we were marching off the field playing Fight Balls Fight. And the Memphis team ran out. And there was the top of the tee coming off the field towards the end zone was probably 16 steps from the goal line. And the Memphis State Band cranks into their fight song. And it pissed Dr. Julian off. I had just seen them hugging minutes before. So Dr. Julian says, come here to me. And he says, you go tell Sid McKay he's an SOB. I'm like, I laughed. I thought Dr. Julian was joking. They had just been hugging. He grabbed me by my uniform and said, do it. So I went over to where the Memphis State Band, in that moment, it looked like there were 8,000 of them to me in my orange uniform, all of them in blue. I walked over to Sid McKay. He's flanked by 300-pound grad students, I'm convinced at this moment. And he says, I say, hi, Dr. McKay, my name's Lafe Cook, and I'm the drum major of the band. Clearly, I'm in my uniform, and Dr. Julian has asked me to come over here and tell you that you're an SOB. And Sid McKay just put his arm around me and said, I've known Jay Julian for 30 years. It's fine, boy, and spanked me on the butt and sent me on my way.
That's really good. But that camaraderie that's common in those folks, right? They all have that relationship. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, it's not specific to those people. It's not specific to the iconic ABA crowd. It's not. I mean, you and I have it. I think it's more specific to shared experience that is the same no matter where you do it in our profession. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So seeing those guys, because their names were well known and I was young, is not that different than being at TMEA and catching up with you and our friends. It's just now we're the older guys.
Yeah.
And they were the older guys, you know? And so I don't know. I think it's just this awesome commonality of shared experience in our profession.
Yeah. And I mean, I want this podcast to enrich that. That's the thing that I think we're in danger of in Tennessee, is just the regionality of it all. And how much better can we be if we break down those barriers between East, West, and Middle? It's hard because of the way we're organized association-wise, but the more we can do to create those connections, the better we are.
And I think TMEA has to play a role in that. And TMEA has had many challenges in trying to do that. I think some of those challenges have to do with how we get more directors to our conference, which is the obvious place where those interactions and that camaraderie occurs and is forged. I think our good friend Joel Denton and his presidency and some of the things that are going to happen, we hope, in his time, may move us forward in that way. You know, it is unfortunate that, I don't know how to say it exactly, but primarily directors who come to TMEA, band directors who come to TMEA, have kids in the all-state bands.
Right. That's the draw.
But that does not represent the population of Tennessee band directors remotely.
No.
And so we've got to find a way to make TMEA the place where these connections are created. Not the only place, but the most obvious place. We got to figure out how we make a situation, a scenario that gets more of all of our band directors, regardless of whether they've got, because, you know, and you know this better than I, and, you know, you're a small band podcast guys, you know, the other day we're talking about all this, like, you know, Dobyns-Bennett is an outlier, and I am well aware of that. I would never pretend we are not an outlier in this world. And those people are slugging it away in places that have challenges that Dobyns-Bennett does not face. Those are the people we need to interact with at TMEA.
Yes. And the good thing about what those guys are doing, I'm finding so much ingenuity with those rural band directors. I mean, just last weekend, I was in Lawrence County with Daryl Boston. And Daryl Boston organized years ago this Swing into Spring mass band concert for all the groups in Lawrence County. It's been going on for 33 years, this whole thing. And he's had some really outstanding conductors there. it's a way for him to create sort of a small nucleus within that county. There's the Twin Lakes organization up north of Cookeville in southern Kentucky. All those folks up there that get together, and they have a 3-day PD that's coming up in a couple of weeks where they bring in people like Randall Standridge and Bruce Pearson are zoomed in for those kind of things. I mean, that's just that kind of collegiality. People seek it out, and I'm finding that that's happening more commonly than I was ever aware of.
And
So, yeah, I think if we can find a way to sort of create some ties between that and TMEA, and that's going to be my job as this rural schools chair, I just think there's a lot of potential here to really strengthen those ties in ways that I didn't even know about 6 months ago.
And there's an amazing message there that I think sometimes people aren't aware of. And that is the people that we look up to, composers, conductors. I think by and large, they'd almost rather do that than conduct another all-state band. That feels special to those folks. And I think we put them on pedestals and think that they are only interested, and some of them are, but not all, but only interested in doing that really high-level music making. But so those folks that might listen to this podcast who are putting together all county bands or even having just a symphonic band camp at your school, like shoot for the moon, because sometimes those people are there.
They say yes.
Yes. And they want, and yes, more than just say yes, they're like super into it.
When I was at Overton, starting in the 99-2000 school year, we got together with NOLA and Eric Zimmerman, this is me and Joanne, and decided to create a collaborative concert between Overton and MLK. And our first clinician was Jim Croft from Florida State. Now, it was Overton and MLK, and they were pretty good bands, but this man was conducting all over, and he was willing to come in and spend 2 days with us just to work with those two high school bands. What impressed me about Jim Croft was that he talked about he conducted the top group at Florida State, but he also conducted the freshman band. He wanted to conduct the freshman band because those students came to Florida State to be in band because of him. And so he felt a responsibility to have that imprint with the freshmen. And I thought that was incredible. And the next year we had Jerry Junkin. I mean, those folks are willing to come in and do county honor bands or these sessions in small schools and small counties and whatnot. So yeah, shoot for the moon.
I love that. And I hate name dropping. I hate it so much, but I will mention that my experience with the ABA shows you that those are just people, man. All those people are just people. They're just people. Mm-hmm. And they have been fortunate to be in situations. Of course, they're talented. But they've also been fortunate to be in situations that elevated them to some level of recognition, which I've also been the beneficiary of. But you just learn they're people, man. They're people.
Okay, so you finished at UT. Any more on the UT story?
Oh, no. I mean,
before we go to Virginia?
All day, but no.
Okay, you're right. And it's a clean podcast. Okay, so then your first job was EC Glass in Virginia.
Yeah. That was a neat school, a historic band program that had some Tennessee connections. Harold Ford had been the band director there, who's a UT grad. And there were several others, but anyway, it was the perfect scenario. I got to follow the guy who followed the icon there. Mm-hmm. I also took it mid-year. It was great. I loved Lynchburg, Virginia. I loved my job there. The only reason I left was because Dobyns-Bennett came open, and I had remembered being one of the things you did as drum major. It doesn't all come back to being UT drum major, by the way, but one of the things you did as drum major was you were the announcer at ETSBOA Concert Festival, which back in the day, as you well know, was intense. And so I announced, and I remember always being so impressed with the Dobyns-Bennett band in the 80s, and also loved Tyler Fleming, who was the band director at that time, who was just an awesome personality. And
Mm-hmm.
and so when the job at DB came open, I threw my hat in the ring. So the applicants for the DB job when I applied were Bruce Dinkins, Mac Bowman, and Lafe Cook. And the truth is, they just wanted the cheap option.
Yeah. Yeah. No master's degree, just bachelor's
That's
at that
right.
point.
That's right. And I was a child, so they're like, well, we can pay this guy and chicken. We can give him some chickens in some cages, and whatever. He'll take it.
What did you learn at EC Glass that helped you at DB?
How to deal with diversity, which oddly, Dobyns-Bennett does not have. So EC Glass was very racially diverse, and that taught me how to communicate with people from lots of different backgrounds. Now, Dobyns-Bennett is the opposite of racially diverse. We are economically diverse, but I think that sort of learning about how to communicate consistently, regardless of a person's background, was super beneficial. I think that's the great lesson. And then I had an amazing mentor in Lynchburg, Robert Carter, who was a Georgia boy and was the band director at Dalton High School for a long time, and ended his career at Billerica High School in Georgia. But when I was at EC Glass, he was the Crosstown High School Heritage High School. And each of our schools had their own middle school, but we co-taught a third middle school. And man, he was an
cool.
amazing mentor to me, like top tier. So good.
Okay, what did you learn from him?
I learned what a real band director is. That's a term they used to say, or what a real band director is. And it's how to manage your time and how to manage people, how to prioritize concert. This is it. How to prioritize. And I had gotten this at UT for sure, but how to prioritize concert band over marching band. Like just an understanding that you can have a high-powered marching band, and that's where the money gets spent, and that's a reality. But from an instructional priority, concert band is where it has to be and should be.
So how does that work in practice in the way you described it?
It's about understanding that teaching kids the lifelong skill of playing an instrument is your job, right? And to teach them to love making music and to be consumers of good music, which marching band isn't that. I mean, I love competitive marching band, and we can talk about that in a minute. But creating students who want to make music, who want to hear music, who want to make music, I said that twice, who want to continue to be involved as music makers as adults. Like that's the thing, right?
Yeah, it's the message that you're communicating to parents and students and administrators about what's really important, right? When you get that moment to communicate and have that interaction, it's being able to communicate that message in the moment with administrators, students, and parents, right?
Yeah, but the in the moment part's a little scary, because if you don't create a structure to allow yourself for the moment to land, it can't just be about the moment, right? Like it has to be your day-to-day behaviors have to indicate that truth for the moment to land, especially when your marching band is successful, because people can look at the product, the trophies, the accolades of the marching band and not understand that the concert band is how that happened.
So we know what Dobyns-Bennett is like now. It's a huge program. It's excellent in all levels. You've done the Rose Parade and Macy's numerous times. You've been a Grand National finalist. You've played Midwest twice. We know these things. What was Dobyns-Bennett like when you got there in 97?
It was real good. It was real good, actually. It wasn't very big, but it was real good. They had just played National MENC, I think the year before I got there. The band director I followed was not a great people person, but a really good musician. He was the buffer of personality standpoint between Tyler Fleming and myself, which I was thankful for him. But I was also thankful for him because he was a good musician. Kingsport has always been a band town, man. It has always been a band town. And I've got pictures all over the walls of DB, going back to its origins of excellence. What I benefited from several things. I landed when the middle schools were exploding. And I landed when I was in a place where I had that, want to prove yourself thing that those of us in our late 20s have. And Dobyns-Bennett now is very different than it was then. And the numbers are great. And when I was thinking about this podcast, I wondered if you would ask about size, because I think that's one of the things people equate Dobyns-Bennett with, is just the number of students. And size is great. It really is. Having lots of kids is, in many ways, the whole game-changing component. Advocacy, the number of parents and alumni you have, and all those things. What I miss having a big band is that connectivity with students. I tell people now I'm the CEO of the Dobyns-Bennett Band. And I miss the ability to connect with as many students as I used to be able to connect with.
I understand that a little bit from my Franklin experience. It becomes more administrative the larger the band gets, and you're less connected to the little freshman trombone player in the back that's kind of shy.
Yeah, it
changes.
I recognized that coming. And so when I felt the shift, when the way kids talked about me at the band banquet, that's when I felt it. And I remember those early years where they talked about the connectivity, and then they began to talk about the sort of umbrella thing. And so I thought, okay, this is my reality. If I've got a graduating class every year of 80 kids, that I can't worry about what they think of my, I don't know how to say this in the right way, but I guess where I consciously came to was, I want to make sure that I protect an experience for students that's based on the program's structure and expectations and finances, all the things. Like I wanted to make sure I protected the program's ability to provide a meaningful experience for kids.
Yes.
In doing that, I felt like from a time standpoint, I couldn't do that and also have like really meaningful one-on-one relationships with every kid in a band program of 350 kids. And so I hope we've succeeded at that. I don't know, this is going to maybe come across really weird in a podcast, but I knew there was one thing I could make sure I could do, and that was make sure we were creating a program. The program was the access to the experience, to the takeaways.
Well, because as you grow, you're adding adults that are involved with the program too. So I would imagine to some degree where you might have been providing that sort of intimate relationship early on in Dobyns-Bennett, as the program grows and the staff grows, you're maintaining that level of closeness the kids feel. It's with an assistant director or with a staff member or something like this, instead of maybe you directly.
Yeah, and I hope some of them me. I always feel guilty. The wind ensemble kids, the kids in the top concert band that are the ones I interact with the most. Like I do feel like I still have that with them, but there's lots of other kids that I would wish to have that connection with. But I think that more than just the opportunity to go to the Rose Parade or whatever, I think connecting kids with a program that has a legacy of excellence that they can be proud of maybe is the more important thing that I want to protect.
Yes. Because you can't do it all. You can't do everything. You can't have that one-on-one connection with all the kids in the band and have 9 buses when you travel to a contest or whatever it is. I mean, you've got to make a choice. And so, based on, and I would say just knowing you and knowing your band, you've made the right choice. You've managed it well because the band continues to be strong and flourish.
Well, I appreciate that. And, we all, I think band directors, those of us who are always, I think band directors are always trying to figure out how to do their thing better, and in thinking about how to do something better, often you also question the things you're already doing. And
Yep.
are you getting it right? I think that legacy is the biggest takeaway that I want our kids to have. And that legacy is not attached to my years, but it goes back for a really long time at Dobyns-Bennett. And, our kids who go on to be part of the UT band or the Illinois band or the Indiana band, they instantly get that. They see it's how that works for band. But a lot of our kids are never going to be part of a thing that has the same legacy that the Franklin band has through time or the Dobyns-Bennett band has. And so an understanding of legacy for kids who may not intersect legacy as adults is a really positive thing that helps them, understand history and all that.
How much do you talk about legacy with the band
All
and the student role in legacy and building legacy?
the time. All the time.
Good. I know you did.
Every time we get an invitation to something that is an awesome experience for kids, I tell the kids, you didn't get this. You're going to experience it, but you didn't earn it. The kids before you earned it. And so you've got to continue to excel so that the next group gets to experience those awesome opportunities,
Yes. That was a theme for us at Franklin too, was you have a responsibility to take what's been given to you and pass it on to the next generation. So, when we started that BHAG in 2010, that was a decade-long goal with students that are involved with the program for 4 years. There had to be some sense of connectivity through the decades and the generations, so that they felt that sense of not only responsibility, but also they were appreciative of the folks that had come before them. So how much do you do with alumni? If alumni come by to see the band or whatever, what is the relationship between the current DB band and the alumni of the band?
Really, really strong, but only not due to any effort on our part until very recently. And this is a great thing that I want to talk about. When we talked about Dobyns-Bennett when I talked about Dobyns-Bennett having some advantages, the biggest advantage that Dobyns-Bennett has is one high school town. Mm-hmm. One high school town is the thing. We have very meaningful challenges regarding our demographic. When we compete nationally, no one can believe it when I tell them Kingsport's demographic realities. And those are our challenges, but our incredible advantage is one high school town. And so that creates automatic alumni connection, but we are getting ready. So the Dobyns-Bennett band turns 100 in the 2026-2027 school year. And so we are, as we ramp up to that also coincidentally is my 30th year teaching school in the state of Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Just throwing that out there.
Just a couple of random numbers being thrown together right now. I got it.
So we are very much making an attempt. So, guys, we ask for money. We do that. We do the crowdsourcing thing. But we have really only done it through many, many years of parent connectivity. I've been teaching at Dobyns-Bennett for 27 years. I've got 45-year-old graduates. We've never connected with them in any way. And I'm not saying we only want to connect with them for money, those that might listen to this podcast, but we might do that at some point. But truly, that's a thing that this is where volunteer boards are hard. So you have a volunteer board and they're all invested in their moment and they're using whatever platform to collect information and then it switches again and switches again. And so the ability for high school bands to keep a database of alumni is something that all of us should think about. All of us should think about. And so we're getting very organized here right in the short term. I had a meeting this very morning about a platform and an attempt to reconnect with alumni. We sent, actually, I think we sent them out yesterday. We sent out 1,400 emails yesterday to begin this process, but those were the 1,400 parent emails we still had.
Mm-hmm.
And that now we will begin to collect Facebook posts, all the thing. That's a process we're like beginning literally right now.
So legacy, Lafe, this is something you and I talk about, and we joke because you and I are often, I feel like we're the two old guys in the Muppet box up there that's being a little snarky about people. But what impact did your dad and Dr. Julian have on the way you conduct yourself? What is their legacy, and how does it impact you as a teacher?
Wow, that's a great question. I think band directing and public service, like the National Park Service, are so similar. So I grew up watching my dad, and they're both political, interestingly, and they're borderless, interestingly. So my dad, as a National Park Service executive, just was all the time talking about the mission and the purpose of the National Park Service with people from all over the country, whether that was on the phone or meetings that occurred in our home over martinis. Like, it was all that collegiality that then I instantly witnessed when I intersected with those people who were experienced in the band world. And so one wonders if legacy is attached to purpose. What is the mission of our profession? The National Park Service is conservation and protecting the things that we've inherited from our country and our ancestors and all that. And band directing is similar in that way. And then I think there's an understanding in band people of the history of our activity, of our profession,
Mm-hmm.
that is also similar to the Park Service.
And how does that impact you, though, on a daily basis? How often do you hear either your dad's voice or Dr. Julian's voice when you're going about your business as the DB band director?
The older I get, the less, I think, probably. I remember in my early years, I heard Dr. Julian all the time. In my mid years, let's say, my dad's voice became, as my job became more political, as it does when you're more successful, I began to hear my dad's voice more.
Mm-hmm.
And now, some of this comes from being at one school for so long. There's other voices that I hear that we've not mentioned. I hear amazing principals and superintendents who I've intersected with in my career at Dobyns-Bennett. Those are voices who now enter my head when I make decisions.
What are you optimistic about with band in Tennessee?
I'm optimistic about a lot about band in Tennessee. I'm super optimistic. So I'm super optimistic about my alma mater. Oh my gosh. John Zastapel is doing amazing work there. But I'm also love Albert Wynn at the University of Memphis on the complete other end of the state, who's doing incredible work. But I've gotten to know the Tennessee Tech people a little better recently, and I'm excited about the evolution in COC and hearing what's going on at MTSU. And I love that our colleague Joe Herman, retired, is like all the time in band rooms across our state. And so I'm excited about the way that the past and the present, this sounds a little cheesy, but like they seem to be intersecting almost more than ever, which is cool.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of really good young teachers. I think it's easy to sit around and be the old guy and be like, everybody's bad. But that's just not true. There are so many really good young teachers who are doing a great job and are trying to learn and are asking for advice and asking for help and helping to create those connections between the older generation and themselves. And I'm excited about those folks.
Me too. I've had some amazing student teachers lately too, who, not even young teachers, yet to be teachers, who have a get it factor that I'm not sure I've seen consistently in recent years. And so I'm not sure what the genesis of that change would be, but it's exciting.
What would you say to young teachers?
What would I say to young teachers? That's a tough one.
Top three bits of advice from Lafe Cook.
Oof, God, I'm bad at this, David, because as people make fun of me, I'm a nuts and bolts person. I am not good at the motivational language. My wife, who is so,
I don't want motivational language. I want I think nuts and bolts is what they need.
well, I can give you one off the top of my head is don't teach like anyone other than yourself. Like don't try and teach like someone else you watched teach. That is instantly disingenuous to students. It won't feel comfortable to you. And so you've got to figure out what teaching looks like for you through the lens of the people you've watched teach, for sure. But you got to teach like yourself. So that would be thing one. Thing two is you got to know, you have to have pedagogy to a certain degree. Now, new teachers are never going to know every fingering on every instrument. But I think in the world of schools of music over departments of music at higher ed institutions, especially if you're a talented musician, you sit in an ensemble playing the hardest literature known to man, none of which you're ever going to program with your high school band, and no one's talking to you about the pitch tendencies on instruments. And so somewhere you've got to get that. And if your university isn't giving it to you, shame on them. But you've got to talk to your mentor teacher when you're student teaching about that. You have to. It doesn't matter whether you teach at Dobyns-Bennett or Lewis County. You mentioned that school.
Yes.
You have to have that information because they're all going to need it. Number three is don't keep up with the Joneses in either of the seasons, marching band or concert band. Most of us, I don't believe that there are really that many grade 6 high school bands in our country, frankly. Not that many. If you're at a new school and you think your band can do a grade 4, I want to do a grade 3. There's lots of grade 3 music out there.
Yep.
You can't teach fundamentals if you're having to cram technique. You can't teach fundamentals if you're having to, in the short term, expand a student's range on their horn.
This is my sermon all the time. Like, very good.
It's Randall Coleman who says, I'm going to get it wrong, but I think he says, I love this. He says, play softer, play easier music. I think that's it. It's one of Randall Coleman's things. Another great teacher in our state now, by the way.
I had a compliment from Pete Evans when I was at Overton with the symphonic band at Overton. This is like my third year. We played something that was probably below their ability level, and they played really well. The band played great. And that was the compliment that I got from Mr. Evans was, thank you for playing music that was it was thank you for playing music that wasn't above their heads. And that was a big imprint on me as a core memory, because they can't be musicians if they're scrambling around trying to figure out which finger to use for this note. You're not really activating those ensemble experiences if they're in survival mode.
I have a friend whose marching band was judged, and a very accomplished band who was doing a lot of amazing stuff. But the judge, who I believe was Alfred Watkins, said, I believe your students play their music better than they play their instruments. And that can be a painful thing to hear,
Yeah.
And so I think that's a valuable lesson for people to consider when we've already said it. You can just do so much more teaching when you aren't having to really force the technique, range, key, whatever.
And the student experience is better.
Yeah.
Because they feel successful. Okay, Lafe, I want to finish this by saying this. I think people can look at Dobyns-Bennett and think that you have everything, that it's easy to be the band director at Dobyns-Bennett, and they can say these kind of tropes that people say. And I know it's not like that. And I've known you for a long time. And the moment that cemented this for me to have such a high degree of respect for you was my last year at Franklin, when we did our symphonic band festival in the spring. And we invited all these schools to come in, and we had you as one of our clinicians, along with Joe Herman and with Tom Verrier. And you clinicked the Laverne High School freshman band. Now, Rontrell Callahan is doing a great job over there at Laverne High School, but this was earlier on in his career there. You clinicked the Laverne High School freshman band, and that's some of the best band teaching I've seen in the last 20 years. You were with those kids where they needed to be. It was pedagogy. It was motivating. It was a thing to see. And so I hope that people will understand that, yes, you're at Dobyns-Bennett, but if you are at any other school in Tennessee, that band would be excellent. So I just want to thank you for that. We've talked about it a couple of times, that moment with you and Laverne's freshman band, but that meant a lot to me to watch you just work with those kids and do such a great job.
Well, thank you. That's super flattering. Every time the Dobyns-Bennett band plays out of tune or tanks on something, my friend Ryan Gilbert, my longtime assistant, 20 years, he'll say, well, it's just a stick job. PB's just a stick job. We laugh about it all the time.
Right.
We stopped. I remember we were doing the Promise of Living, the Singleton Promise of Living transcription a few years ago, and we got like 8 measures in, and I just had to stop. Like, I had to stop on the stage at a concert and start it over. And I walked off the stage, and Ryan looked at me and said, "Stick job."
Yeah, I know it's not that.
But teaching kids is teaching kids, and we've got amazing students across the board. And when you've got 300 plus kids, I'm not afraid to say out loud, when you have 300 kids, like, you're going to have 65 that play pretty well, and I'm fully admitted of that. The hard work is with those second and third and some years fourth band kids, right? And getting them to where, and we love to metric watching kids who go from the fourth band and at some point are in our wind ensemble. That is such an awesome thing to watch.
Those are the best stories.
Oh,
yes.
Love that.
All right, Lafe, thanks so much for being on. I think actually this might be the beginning of I'm always looking for how to organize this podcast for next year. And I know we're going to have some series. We're going to organize this stuff more with series. One of those is going to be names that we shouldn't forget. But I think maybe one is just something like this. Just, I don't know what I'm going to call it. Maybe it's Tell Us Your Story or something. Just having you on just to talk about what you've done in your time has been really fun for me. So thank you for being on.
Well, thank you for the work you're doing on this podcast. I think it's incredible. And I appreciate your commitment to it. And love you, brother.
Yeah, man, I love you too. Tell Heather hello.
Will do.
And Piper.
Yes, they just got home, so.
Thanks for listening to Bandstand. Bandstand's mission is to build a stronger, more unified band community in Tennessee by fostering meaningful conversations about the past, present, and future of school bands in our state. If you have topic suggestions or need to get in touch with us, email us at tbabandstandpodcast@gmail.com. Your input is important to us, and if you have a topic you'd like us to discuss about the past, present, or future of Tennessee bands, please let us know. Again, that email is tbabandstandpodcast@gmail.com. Right now we're broadcasting on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts, so please subscribe, review, and rate. Box 5, please. And if you find something interesting or helpful, please share this podcast with your friends. Bandstand is proud to be sponsored by Music for All and Romeo Music. See you next time.